Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
When I was 12, I decided I wanted a mountain bike more than anything else in the world. Not just any bike, but a really good one that could handle rough trails and jumps. My parents weren't going to just buy me one, they believed in earning things, and honestly, so did I. So I started my own little business in the neighborhood. Every weekend I'd go door to door, asking if people needed their lawns mowed or leaves raked. I'd wake up early on Saturdays, load up my dad's old lawnmower in his truck, and spend the entire day working on different yards. During fall, I'd rake leaves until my hands were covered in blisters. The pay wasn't amazing. Most people gave me $20 or $30 per yard, but it added up slowly. For 2 whole years, I saved every single dollar I made. I kept it all in a coffee can in my bedroom, counting it every few weeks to see how close I was getting to my goal. I had researched the exact bike I wanted online, a beautiful mountain bike that cost around $400. I also wanted to get a really good lock because I'd heard too many stories about bike thieves. I figured I'd need about $550 total to get everything I wanted. Finally, after what felt like forever, I had saved up $600. I was so excited I could barely sleep the night before I planned to go buy my bike. The next morning, my dad drove me to the bike shop and I walked out with my dream bike plus a carbon fiber and carbon steel lock that the shop owner said was nearly impossible to cut through. But then it started raining. For an entire month, it rained almost every single day. I'd stare out my bedroom window at my beautiful new bike sitting in the garage, just waiting for my first real ride. The weather forecast kept showing more rain and I was getting more frustrated each day. Then finally, one Saturday, I woke up and saw sunshine. The temperature was perfect, about 80 degrees, and there wasn't a cloud in the sky. I knew exactly where I wanted to go. The community amenity center had a basketball court where I could play and hang out. It was about a 20-minute bike ride from my house, which would be perfect for testing out my new bike. I rode to the amenity center and immediately fell in love with how smooth and fast my bike was. When I got to the basketball court, I looked around for the best place to lock it up. Right next to the basketball court was a tennis court with those chain link walls that had pretty big holes in them. I had an idea. Instead of just locking my bike to something obvious, I threaded the chain through the bike frame and then through one of the holes in the fence in a way that made it look like the bike wasn't even locked up. If someone tried to ride away with it, they'd only get a couple inches before the hidden chain stopped them completely and probably threw them off. I started shooting hoops and was having a great time. About 30 minutes into my practice, I noticed a woman and a young kid walking up to the courts. The kid looked like he was maybe 9 years old, and he immediately zeroed in on my bike. The kid asked his mom if he could ride that bike. The woman looked over at my bike and then walked straight over to me. She asked me if the bike was mine, and I told her yes, it was my bike. She said okay, then turned to her kid and told him to go ahead and ride it. I told her to go ahead, but warned her that if her kid tried to ride it, he was going to get hurt. She said that since there was no visible lock on the bike, it was her kid's now. This woman was basically telling her kid to steal my bike, the bike I had worked 2 years to afford just because she thought it wasn't locked up. I explained to her that the bike had cost me over $500 and I had worked for 2 years to save up for it. I told her it was locked up, she just couldn't see how. But she wasn't listening. She was already pushing her kid toward my bike. I tried to warn them again, but the kid climbed on and started pedaling, just like I knew would happen. He made it about 2 feet before the hidden chain caught and the bike stopped dead. The sudden stop sent him flying forward, and he landed face first in a muddy puddle next to the tennis court. The kid started crying, covered head to toe in mud, and his mother absolutely lost her mind. She screamed that her precious child had just gotten hurt and was all muddy. She yelled that it was all my fault and that I was going to pay for his medical bills and his clothes. She was screaming so loud that people from the other courts were starting to stare. I quickly unlocked my bike chain and hopped on. I told her that her kid had tried to steal my bike after I had warned them both that he would get hurt. She shouted that I couldn't just leave and that she was calling the police. I didn't stick around to hear any more. I pedaled as fast as I could towards home, but when I looked back, I saw her dragging her muddy kid toward a car. My heart was pounding because I realized she might actually follow me home. Sure enough, I could see her car behind me when I rode through the neighborhood streets. I took a bunch of random turns trying to lose her, but she seemed determined to follow me. Finally, after about 10 minutes of this chase, I made it to my street. I rode straight to my backyard and put my bike behind our storage shed where it couldn't be seen from the street. Then I went inside and tried to calm down. About 30 minutes later, my dad came into my room looking confused and angry. He asked me why there was a woman and a kid in our backyard trying to take my bike. This crazy woman had actually followed me home, figured out which house was mine, and was now trespassing in our backyard trying to steal my bike. I explained everything that had happened at the basketball court. My dad told me to call the police right away. I dialed 911 and explained the situation. The dispatcher said they'd send someone right away. Within 2 minutes, I heard sirens in front of our house. My dad and I went outside and walked around to the backyard, where we found 2 police officers talking to the woman and her kid. She was still covered in mud and looked absolutely furious. One of the officers asked her if she had followed a minor home and entered his family's property without permission to take his bicycle. Karen said that the bike had hurt her son and that he deserved compensation. The officer told her she was under arrest for trespassing and attempted theft. Her kid was crying again, not from being muddy this time, but because his mom was being arrested. A relative had to come pick up the kid while she was taken away in the police car. I never saw that woman again, and I still have my bike 2 years later. Every time I ride it, I remember that crazy day and how my simple hidden lock trick saved my bike from being stolen. After I got laid off from my warehouse job during the whole mess in 2020, I needed something steady. The security company I applied to placed me at this massive retailer as a door greeter and receipt checker. The pay wasn't amazing, but it was honest work and I got benefits. The uniform they gave me was pretty official looking, dark blue with patches and a police-style badge that clearly said security in big letters. It looked nothing like the bright red vests the store employees wore. You'd think that would be obvious enough, but apparently not. My job was simple. Stand at the front door, greet customers, count how many people came in during the crazy times when we had capacity limits, hand out masks when people forgot them, check receipts on the way out, and mark returns. I wasn't supposed to leave my post unless it was an emergency, or my supervisor told me to cover a different door. The first few months were a learning curve. I didn't know where anything was in the store since I spent all my time at the entrance. When customers asked me where to find stuff, I'd try to point them in the right direction based on the big signs hanging from the ceiling. But that was about all I could do. Things got interesting pretty quickly though. One busy Saturday, I was processing a huge pile of returns. Some incidents had happened earlier that week, so management told us we had to mark every single returned item individually instead of just counting them. I was halfway through this lady's mountain of stuff when I felt someone tap my shoulder. I turned around to see this older woman standing there with her arms crossed, looking impatient. I told her I was almost done with the returns, and then I could try to help her. I went back to writing down product codes and putting stickers on items. 2 seconds later, another tap on my shoulder and a loud clearing of her throat. I repeated what I'd said before about being almost finished and asked her to give me 1 more minute. I had maybe 2 items left to process. Then she tapped me again, harder this time, and demanded that I show her where the bedding was. I quickly pointed toward the back corner of the store where I could see the big bedding sign hanging from the ceiling, and told her it was over there, under that sign. I finished up the last couple stickers and the return customer thanked me and left. But when I turned around, the older woman was still standing there tapping her foot. I asked if there was something else I could help with. She said yes. She needed me to take her to the bedding section. I apologized and explained that I was security and had to stay up at the front. She let out this huge huff and put her hands on her hips. She insisted that I needed to take her because she wouldn't be able to find it on her own. I was genuinely confused at this point. The betting section was literally visible from where we were standing, and there was a massive sign that said betting right above it. I pointed again and explained that it was right under the sign that said betting and that I couldn't leave the front. I suggested that if she needed more help, she should find someone back there who could assist her. She huffed again and walked off toward the betting section. I watched her walk directly to it without any problems. A few weeks later, my supervisor moved me to cover the garden center door. It was usually pretty quiet back there, which was nice. There was this one cashier who worked the garden register, really nice guy, but super quiet. He'd smile and nod when I said hi, but I think English might not have been his first language, or maybe he was just shy. Either way, he kept to himself. I was standing by the garden center exit when this woman walked over from inside the store. She walked straight up to me with this determined look and asked if I could help her find a certain weed killer. I told her I wasn't really sure where it was, but I thought it might be on the inside aisles of the garden center. I offered to call a garden center employee to help. Her whole demeanor changed instantly. She demanded to know why I didn't know where it was. I explained that I was just security and didn't work for the store. She made this loud, angry, huffing sound and walked over to the quiet cashier. She pointed right at me and practically yelled, asking what I even did there. The poor cashier just looked confused and didn't say anything. She stood there for a few seconds waiting for an answer, then walked off when she didn't get one. But the most satisfying encounters were with this one manager. The guy was a real piece of work, always trying to pull people off their assigned jobs to help him with whatever he needed done. His favorite thing was asking people if they looked like they could use something to do, then giving them some random task. Most of the store employees would drop what they were doing to help him because he was high up in the management chain. But I didn't work for the store. I worked for the security company. He couldn't order me around and he knew it. When I was covering the garden center, he'd come over and try to get me to move pallets or help him with inventory. It was always late in the evening when things were slow, and honestly, I wouldn't have minded helping just to break up the boredom. But I'd heard other employees complaining about how he'd interrupt their work and leave them scrambling to finish their actual jobs. He'd walk over and tell me I looked like I could use something to do, then ask me to help him move pallets. I'd apologize and explain that I was there to guard the door and couldn't abandon my post, or my manager would have me removed. He'd get this annoyed look on his face every time and point out that I wasn't doing anything else anyway. I'd remind him that standing there doing nothing was exactly what I was paid to do, guard that door. He'd walk over and drag the pallets around himself after that. He'd huff and puff while I stood there listening to podcasts, doing exactly what I was supposed to be doing. Nothing except watching the door. One evening he tried a different approach. He came over with this fake, friendly smile and said he knew I was security, but surely I could help for just 5 minutes. He explained that he had all these pallets to move and his guys had already gone home. I told him I'd love to help, but I wasn't allowed to leave my post because of company policy. He pressed further, asking who would know if I helped for just a few minutes. I explained that my supervisor did random checks, and if he showed up and I wasn't there, I'd get written up or maybe even fired. He started moving the pallets himself. I just stood there doing my job exactly like I was instructed, watching him struggle with pallets that would have been easy work for 2 people. The irony wasn't lost on me. Here was a guy who couldn't manage his own schedule or his own employees, trying to boss around someone who didn't even work for his company. And every time he failed, I got a front row seat to watch him deal with the results of his own poor planning. After a few months of this, word got around among the store employees about the security guard who wouldn't budge from his post. Some of them started coming over during their breaks just to watch the manager try to convince me to help him. And it became a little bit of entertainment for everyone. Working security instead of retail meant that I get to be the immovable object. When entitled customers demanded I abandon my duties to serve them, or when pushy managers tried to treat me like their personal assistant, I had the perfect response every time. I'd politely explain that I was just security and whatever they wanted wasn't my job. My dad owns a small metal fabrication shop on the outskirts of our town. He mostly does custom metal work for local farmers and businesses, gates, railings, that sort of thing. The shop is in an old industrial building with a small parking area behind it where he keeps his work truck and materials. Yesterday was one of those perfect spring days when you finally switch from winter to summer tires. My dad had called me the night before asking if I wanted to come by during my lunch break to change my tires. He had the proper tools and a flat concrete area behind his shop where it would be easy to work. I figured it would save me money and give us a chance to catch up. I arrived around noon, right when my dad and his two employees were taking their lunch break inside. The timing worked out perfectly since I could use the space without getting in anyone's way. I parked my beat-up sedan near the back entrance and started unloading my summer tires from the trunk. I grabbed a cart from the shop to move everything: the 4 tires, jack, lug wrench, and a few other tools I might need. The parking area behind the shop is pretty secluded. Most customers park in front of the building where there's better access to the main entrance. The back area is really just for employees and deliveries. I had my car radio turned up pretty loud, playing some rock music while I worked. It was a nice day and I was in a good mood. About 5 minutes after I started organizing my tools, I heard a car pull up. I looked over and saw this expensive black car, one of those luxury models. A woman got out, and I immediately knew she wasn't from around here. Everything about her screamed big city: the fancy clothes, the perfect hair, the way she carried herself like she owned the place. What struck me as odd was that she had parked in the back area instead of the customer parking in front. I kept working but watched her out of the corner of my eye as she walked toward me. When she got close enough to hear my music, she made this gesture for me to turn it down. I figured she wanted to ask for directions or something, so I reached into my car and lowered the volume. I asked if I could help her with anything. She immediately asked when she could come back to pick up her car. I was completely confused by her question since her car was sitting right there. I told her I didn't know and that she could come back whenever she wanted. She seemed thrilled by this response and told me she was going to the grocery store to buy some stuff and would be back in 15 minutes. Then she did something that left me speechless. She walked over to my cart and just dropped her car keys on top of my tire tools. Without another word, she turned around and walked back to the main road. I stood there staring at the keys for a good minute, trying to figure out what had just happened. The only thing I could think of was that maybe she wanted me to keep an eye on her car while she was gone. It's not uncommon for people to worry about door dings in parking lots, especially with an expensive vehicle like hers. I shrugged and went back to working on my tires. About 30 minutes later, she returned carrying 2 shopping bags. She walked straight up to me with this expectant look on her face and asked if the tires were changed. I had no idea what she was talking about and asked her what tires she meant. She got annoyed and said she obviously meant the tires on her car, asking if I had already changed them. That's when it hit me. This woman thought my dad's shop was some kind of auto repair place, and she assumed I was an employee who was supposed to service her car. The whole situation was so ridiculous, I almost laughed. I asked her why in the world I would change her tires. She got defensive and said that since I had already pulled tires out of the shop and had tools out, that meant we were open for business. Now I understood her confusion, but her attitude was starting to rub me the wrong way. Just because I had tires and tools visible didn't mean I was running a tire shop. I asked her if I looked like I was working at an auto shop. That's when she made a huge mistake. Instead of realizing her error and apologizing, she doubled down with the worst possible approach. She called me a deaf fat moron and told me to shut up and change her tires, since I had the tools and tires out. I have a pretty long fuse, but calling me names while demanding I do work for free was way over the line. I'm not the biggest guy, but I've been working with my hands since I was a kid, and I don't take that kind of disrespect from anyone. I called her a piece of trash and asked who she thought she was talking to. I told her she better get out of there before I shoved the jack somewhere very uncomfortable for her. She got even more angry and said, how dare I speak to her like that? She threatened that I was lucky her husband wasn't with her because he would beat me up. Then she demanded I start changing her tires before she slapped my face. Our voices had gotten pretty loud by this point, and I heard the back door of the shop open. My dad came walking out, probably wondering what all the shouting was about. He asked what was going on. She immediately switched tactics, trying to play the victim. She complained that his employee was refusing to change her tires and was being very rude and disrespectful to her. My dad told her that I wasn't their employee and that they don't change tires. He asked what she was doing in the back parking area anyway. She explained that she was there to get her tires changed because her stupid husband didn't know how to do it. I found it interesting how her husband had gone from being my potential destroyer to being incompetent with basic car maintenance in the span of 2 minutes. My dad told her that they weren't an auto shop and that she needed to shut her mouth and leave their property. She got even more indignant and accused us both of being rude and disrespectful. She complained that we were confusing her instead of just telling her we weren't an auto shop. At this point, I could see her getting more and more agitated. She was clenching her fists and moving closer to me. I picked up a metal pipe from my dad's scrap pile, not to threaten her but just to have something in my hand in case she tried anything stupid. Sure enough, she suddenly swung her hand at my face, clearly intending to slap me. I simply raised the pipe defensively, and her hand connected with the metal instead of my cheek. She let out this piercing scream and immediately started clutching her hand. She screamed that I had hurt her and that this was assault. She ran back to her car, still cradling her hand and threatening to call the police and sue us. When she was backing out of the parking area, I got a good look at her license plate. It had the code for the capital city, which explained everything. City people coming to small towns and thinking they can boss the locals around. After she drove off, my dad looked at me and shook his head. He asked what that was all about. I told him it was just another entitled city person who got lost and thought we were running a tire shop. We both started laughing about the whole ridiculous situation. My dad went back inside to finish his lunch, while I completed changing my tires in peace. The rest of the afternoon was perfectly quiet, exactly the way I had planned it. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.